Seppi, hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm really good. It's really a pleasure speaking with you about Blackbird because I want to tell you the story of how I had gotten into the show.
Okay.
Um, I actually, I watch a lot of things for research,
Mm.
primarily. When I'm watching a show for research, I'm focused a little bit differently. When this
Mhm.
show had arrived on the media site
Mm.
and I found it, I'd never heard of it before. But going backwards, looking at the producers, creative team, I was really fascinated. And I watched the whole show as
Mhm.
an escape.
Yeah.
Usually I'm watching for research. To watch this show as an escape is so funny to me because it's such a heavy show. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening, interestingly, is I was knocked out by, in particular, one of the performances on the show. There's a standout performer who was just captivating and caught my attention. So I tried to track down Paul Walter Hauser. And when
Mhm.
that didn't come through, no,
That's good. I'm like, I don't blame you. I try to track him down too. He's
yeah.
freaking amazing.
Well, Paul is great, but I honestly mean this too. I oftentimes when I'm talking about a show, there's a little bit of sort of, oh, I really, but I genuinely was knocked out by your
Oh,
performance on the show.
thank
And I
you.
wasn't planning on doing this as an interview. This was simply
Wow.
just for research. So I kind of reverse engineered it, set about tracking you down, looking for you, putting this together. And I really was genuinely knocked out by your
Oh my
performance on
gosh.
the show. And I'm trying to rewatch now. And it's
Mm.
tough because, and I'm watching you again. You're so in the role. Like I don't even recognize you now based on the show. I want to hear all about how you just found the the headspace.
First of all, thank you so much for saying all that. That means a lot. I mean that. Um, it's always nice to sort of pour yourself into your projects. And no matter what, I feel like as an actor, whenever you give all of yourself to your work, you win in the end, even if nobody sees it. Because although Ray, in his Terry Gross interview, I recently listened to, which was heart wrenching, obviously because of his passing, but there were so many gems in this interview. But he says, as actors, we want our work to be seen. Like any actor who tells you it's not true, they're lying. And I think that that's true to a certain degree. I also think that especially, look, he's an experienced seasoned actor, so it's seasoned actor, so it might be different for him. But for me, anytime I give over to a character or a project, I come out richer because you get to explore different types of people. You get to understand and feel different types of characters, and in turn understand different worlds and different types of people and characters from different backgrounds. And so with Lauren, first, I didn't think that I'd get this role because it was too juicy. And the team, as you said, the creative team and Dennis Lehane, I mean, these are giants in our industry. And I knew that Taron was attached at that time. So I was confident that they'd give it to a name. But after reading just a few lines of the script, I was captivated, to say the least, and I couldn't put it down. I felt like as I was reading, my heart was going to pop out of my chest. And then when Lauren was introduced, I was like, holy wow. He was just so articulate about who she was. I remember in one line he said, I'm paraphrasing because Dennis would say this so much more beautifully than I'm about to say. He said something like, any other agent, this would be routine, but for Lauren, she lights up like a Christmas tree when she's sitting in court, and that said so much about her, these key descriptors that informed for me, that locked in who this person is. And it was one of the few times in my life where immediately I felt like I get her, I get this. And I felt emboldened in a way, because I was like, I am this character. I am the person for this role. And of course, I didn't have expectation, but when I did get the role, Dennis, at my audition, he sort of offered it to me on the spot, and I didn't believe him, but he said, look, I need your help. She's the female lead in this, and you're surrounded by men in this world. And it's important for me to get her right. It's important for her to represent all women, and I want your help. So it felt like he, in that moment, created this partnership. We felt like colleagues, even though he's this cultural icon, that I was intimidated to go in for. I was intimidated, and yet I was given a sense of confidence and comfort, because she was so well written, and it was so clear to me who she was. So that whenever a writer, you're working with great writers, you get confidence from, because you feel supported in the writing. But anyway, it felt like he kind of evened out the sort of collaboration and democratized the creative experience. And that, for me, from that moment forward, and I'm not just saying this, from that moment forward, I felt like I deserved to be there, because he made me feel that way. And everybody, it never felt like there was this hierarchy in the experience. It felt like everybody wanted the same thing. We were all in pursuit of bringing this beautiful script to life, this disturbing, haunting story, but it's so well written, and it's so tastefully done. It's such a tricky subject matter. It can veer easily into, exploitation and gratuity, and never. It's so well done. And everybody felt like equal collaborators. So really it came from the page, but then of course there's all like the actor research and the podcast, the films. I worked with a trainer, not to get into any sort of aesthetic physical shape. It was more just to feel like, where did she hold her attention? How does she walk into rooms? How does she carry herself? And all of these factors, really, they're just clues. They're ways to get deeper into the character's skin. And then by the time I got on set, all of that is, you got to throw it out. You can't be thinking when you're on set. And it's easy not to think when you're working with people who are open and available and ready to do anything and go anywhere.
You're sort of like, in a way, the audience conduit, or at least that's how I felt watching it, that you're sort of our eyes and ears about what's happening, because we don't know if we can trust any of the characters yet. I still don't know if I can trust any of the characters. And yet, when you have these scenes going on, they linger a long time, longer than usual. And your intentions don't always seem to be what we expect them. You've talked about how some of them seem like it's almost like a seduction scene at certain times. It's almost like punishing a petulant child at other times.
Totally.
And I never really know where your intentions quite fit, or if maybe you're sort of putting on an act within your character, which is such a difficult thing to do. And it's part of the reason why I think I had singled out your performance, and I just thought, what's going on right now? When you watch it, do you experience it the same way when you were living it? Did you feel that?
Yeah, I mean, when we were filming it, you're in process, and for me, I can speak for myself. It's, you kind of go in and out of, when you're rehearsing it, when you're finding the scene, you're finding the heart of the scene with your colleagues. You're in more of a critical place. You're trying to think how to best communicate what Dennis is trying to communicate here, how to best bring these characters, or from these characters' point of view, move the plot forward in a way. And then you think about it in a critical way, and then you immerse, right? You can't be thinking of telling the story while you're acting. So then you just start responding to each other. And so, yeah, I think that the experience of doing it is different because you can't be thinking about it while you're doing it. You just have to trust your preparation and whatever rehearsal or process that you've gone through prior. That's why I put a lot of sort of weight and emphasis on the preparation. I had a couple months to prepare for this role. You don't always have that much time. Sometimes you have more time, but that was a good amount of time for me to feel confident in showing up and allowing my sort of my ideas and this woman to just sort of like fly out and her impulses to come through. And so, no, I didn't think about these things when I was doing it, but watching it. So I've had two experiences watching it. The first was when they sent us a screener, and it was still like maybe 6 months after we'd filmed, after we'd wrapped. And it still felt a little close to home at that point. So it was hard to be objective in the beginning. But then I was surprised because I ended up binging it. And I don't like to watch things that I'm involved in. So that said a lot. So now as I'm watching it again, we watched it during the premiere and during another screening. And last night we had a viewing party with Dennis and some of the producers. I feel like I'm watching it as an audience member, and I feel like I'm not really seeing me, which is strange. I'm seeing the character, and I'm kind of like flinching at her sometimes. And it's just, it's a strange experience. And I think again, that has to do with, thank you for saying that it has to do with my performance, but I give my performance to Dennis's writings, to our directors, to the cast, because honestly, you can only be as good as what you're surrounded with. And so it's an interesting singular experience for me, the experience of watching the show and having been in it.
I did sort of a modified binge. I was watching it quicker than I would typically.
Yeah.
But I kind of had, it was unsettling to the point where I think I had a few nightmares, which is so funny because there's no real violence on the show. It's surrounded by it, but there's no jump scares. There's nothing really unsettling shown, but it's always the suggestion or the idea of it. I want to know, when you were on that Zoom table read, which to me just seems like a fascinating concept, and you said that you broke down in tears. Was it even one of your own lines, or what set you off?
No, this was during episode 4, where nobody but Taron and, I mean, in terms of like the 5 main cast members, it's basically just Taron and Paul, their sort of backstories and their storyline. And it was the scene where Paul is talking about what at this point, you don't know if they're dreams or if it's reality. He's describing in detail what happened with one of these murders. And it's so great. And this is another thing that I love about Dennis, is that we're living in this age where there's always this rush to sort of show as much as we can, do as much as we can, get the audience hooked, and like having to create these crazy plot twists and, sex scenes and this and that in order to keep people engaged, because, as a whole, our attention spans are shrinking. But what Dennis does is he doesn't buy into any of that. He trusts his story. He trusts the intelligence of the audience member, and that whenever you have a compelling story, people will lean in. They will get sucked into it. And so there's no need to show anything. It's more haunting and actually horrifying hearing about it and imagining. Like, you think whenever you see something, then it's two-dimensional. It's articulated for you. But that's why people say it's better to know what's happening than to imagine what is happening, because your imagination fills in the gaps with your entire life experience of viewing and living. And that's so much worse, I think, than anything that we could see on screen. And so again, this is a testament to Dennis and his writing. It's just, he is so specific, and he doesn't buy into. What's more haunting, in my opinion, is the fact that these conversations between these characters it sort of they fluctuate. They go from like laughing and being buddy buddy, and then all of a sudden it's serious, and then you don't know if either one of them are going to blow up, or if they're going to cry, or if there's always this underlying volatility in their dynamic. And it's, it goes to the sort of intelligence that the audience has, that they are allowed to sort of engage with and exercise with the show.
I was amazed that it was inspired in large part by real people, one of who is your consultant, an actual story. What interests me in that sense is your character is not quite a real person, maybe, but is. Like, do you try and ground her in history?
I ground her in reality and what I know of or learn of human behavior, research, dynamics, how much the circumstance shapes the person's the way they act and behave and are in the world. She's kind of inspired. She's a fusion of a few different real life characters, and Dennis filled her out with a lot of his imagination. So there was an agent who went undercover and visited Jimmy in prison. There was Beaumont, who was the one who spearheaded, the recruitment process with Jimmy. He kind of distilled and created Lauren from all these different characters. And actually, fun fact, her name was inspired, Lauren McCauley, by Lauren from Lauren Bacall and McCauley from Neil McCauley from Heat, the Michael Mann film. And it was because, in his words, they're both just so cool. And that was who she was. She is so cool. But the reality of a woman in the FBI at any time, but especially in the 90s, I've shared this before, and it's known women have only been allowed to apply and be in the FBI for 51 years. And the first year was 1972. They only admitted 2 women. And the countless testimonies, essays, research that I've done about what it's like to be a woman in the FBI, the agents that I've spoken to, some of whose experiences were rather easy and they were treated well, and many of whom were not treated well. They were really sort of pushed down, or their male counterparts were trying to push them down, trying to, bullying them, making them feel inferior, inadequate. And on top of that, because they decided to cast me, I'm a woman of color. And so what that adds to the conversation. So yeah, I think she's a fictional character inspired by real people, but grounded in reality. I stole for my own backstory a lot of cases and experiences that some of the FBI agents that I spoke to had, in order to fill out her case library in my mind. Because at the end of the day, it matters. Nobody sees that part of the work, but it makes me feel like I deserve to play this character in a way whenever I feel like I can think like her, or I have at least this much insight or knowledge into how her day-to-day goes, and who she is, how she thinks.
You've talked a lot about how you kind of change a little bit based on who you're interacting with, and sort of what you're trying to get, or how the interaction's playing out between each character. What's it like working with Taron, with Greg? I don't even know if you and Paul get to interact on the show, but how do you sort of find do you take in what the actor is giving you, or what the character is giving you? How do you find that click and that balance?
Totally. It's all about I've talked a little bit with you about research and preparation and all of that, but that's David Manmet says in his book, True or False, he says a boxer's not thinking about the history of boxing in the boxing ring. They've got to respond to what's coming at them. And acting is no different from any sport. You have to respond to what's in front of you. So if I have an idea of how Lauren would be, but Taron is doing something, it's just not compatible. And I think what was so lovely about working with all these actors is that they have their own approach, their methods, their the way that they come to set and approach their work. But at the end of the day, we're connecting with each other, and our foundation is this beautiful script. And so Taron, working with him, both of us have done theater. We came from theater backgrounds. So he liked to talk about the scenes, he liked to rehearse. And he was and is so committed to finding the sort of engine, the heartbeat of the scene, the center of the scene, the truth of it. And he will rehearse until we find that. He's not somebody who's just like, okay, let's just shoot it and they'll fix it in editing or whatever. He wants to make sure it feels right and it can play authentically from start to finish. And so I loved collaborating with him, and a lot of Lauren's sort of behavior and mannerisms came from what Taron is giving. Because when she takes a certain approach and it's not working, then she has to pivot. And I feel like these two characters, Jimmy and Lauren, are similar in ways in that they know how to manipulate and change people and change their behavior in order to get what they want. And something that's disarming for Jimmy is that he hasn't met anybody who can keep up with him in this way. That's something that's disarming, I think, for Lauren. It's the same, is that he has this, sort of like otherworldly charisma and charm and, cockiness, self-assurance. And it's hard to chip away at that. So sometimes she goes deep and goes low, hits below the belt, and other times she tries to play more like mind tricks on him, or as you mentioned, like seduction, and she knows how to change herself in order to get what she wants from him. Working with Greg, well, I've been a huge fan of Greg since I was, don't kill me, Greg, but since I was a kid, really. And he's just, I think he is one of the great actors of our time. He can do anything. And just his eyes, his stillness, it's like you never know what's going to come out, and yet he's so reliable. He won't like go off and follow an impulse that will take us to another place in another scene. He's so grounded in the moment, and yet alive and electric in it too. I love working with him, and we became friends immediately. And I think that really helped tell our backstory, in a way that isn't necessarily told in the, it has to be, you have to be able to feel and see our dynamic, and our, like, the amount of time, the hundreds of hours, maybe thousands of hours we've spent with each other, working on this case or other cases. And Greg made it so easy because you could do anything with him. And some of these scenes are like pretty hard exposition scenes that could get a little like, oh, well, here are the facts. But Greg always found ways to ground it and to make it not only so that it moved the stories forward, but it moved our characters' relationships forward too. And then Paul, one of my favorite scenes in the entire series is the polygraph scene. And I am responding 100% to him. He doesn't see me the entire time, but that's like, I had goosebumps. My heart was popping out of my chest during that scene. When you are surrounded by people who are so good, you don't need to do anything, so you just respond. And I felt like I had that privilege, really, of being able to put all of my trust and surrender to other people's talents.
It was really cool for me to see the support that you were getting for the show. There was a number of performers who talked about how much, and I think you had met them all on different projects, and they were all talking about how much they were excited for the show, that they were enjoying what they would see. Have you had the chance yet, though? Have you had the chance to show your inner circle, your friends, family, loved ones, the show, and get their reactions from it?
Yeah, I mean, it was just released worldwide, really, I think in like 110 or 113 countries yesterday.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I took my whole family and some friends to the premiere, and it's been overwhelming, really, in the best way. I feel so excited, and yet such a sense of peace that we really put it all out there with
Mhm.
this project. And we definitely did experience some turbulence in the process. Um, Filming in New Orleans in the summer is not easy. And never also with this unprecedented, that the pandemic, it's these aren't, they create, sort of bumps in the road, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And all of us have said, we've shared that we wouldn't have it any other way, because it created this, yeah, the reception and the appreciation I feel for this show has been unlike anything that I've been part of. And what moves me most actually is talking to somebody like Richard Plepler or Taron or Greg or any of these people who have a lot more experience and time in this industry than I do. And they're saying the same thing, which is just awesome, to be able to work so hard, believe in something. That doesn't necessarily mean it'll translate and that people will also love it and believe in it. But when people are appreciating this, and I think it's an important story. It's so funny. There is a blackbird sitting on that tree right there. It's creepy.
Not sitting
Yeah,
in the dead of night, just
yeah,
happens to be right there
that's
in the
right, on the
day.
tree right in front of me, sort of spying on me. Um, no, it's just, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I think what we need right now is authentic, good storytelling in this digital age where we're so distracted, and we don't feel compelled to commit to anything. I'm proud of a piece that I know people want to stay engaged with and want to commit to.
You've given me license now with the Blackbird. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of how do you feel like justice was served? Do you feel satisfied? Do you feel like the story, I felt first watching it, I almost felt like I was not quite happy.
Mm-hmm.
But going back, I'm thinking within Dennis's style, that's good. I think
Yeah.
I feel good about that. I don't feel good.
Yes. That's so well put. No, I don't think justice is ever served in cases, with crimes against children, murder, rape. No, how can it be served when? And I think that the only semblance of justice comes whenever the perpetrator, Larry Hall is put away. That gives the families whose lives have been devastated by this man a sense of peace that this particular person won't repeat this again. And we've come to find later that in the real life case, there were dozens, I mean, up to like 60 women, maybe even more. I mean, how is justice served? Justice would be if this didn't happen, right? But yeah, I think Dennis does leave it on a good note, where you feel a bit of a sense of relief, but there's this like dissatisfaction. There's a sense that there has to be more. This isn't a happy ending. There's never a happy ending, and that's the reality of what it's like with these kinds of cases.
I want to know for you, because you still have another show that is not fit. The L Word Generation Q is ongoing.
Yeah.
I can't quite get a handle on your class of '09 project. Like, that could be coming out soon. I don't know. I haven't heard enough, but there are hints about it. How does this, and in general, your roles? I mean, you don't take the easy way on anything. You're in hard-hitting stuff. You're things that make a difference. but your identity too as a refugee. This show is not about that.
No.
But don't you bring that with you to every role that you're doing?
I love that comment, that question, because I mean, how could I not? It's not about bringing my background as a former refugee, but it's, if you're going to cast me, like Dennis decided to cast me as Lauren McCauley, and of course that will come. The plot thickens a little more, as I mentioned before, because she is the only woman in the FBI here. But now she is the only woman, and she's a woman of color in the FBI.
Yeah.
And whether you have immigrated in your lifetime, you are first generation, second generation, your background influences, your position in this world. And so I think what's nice is that it doesn't have to be, like it's not important for the audience to know the specifics of, say, Lauren's. I mean, we do know the specifics of Gigi's background from the L-word generation Q, and about my character in Class of '09, about her background a little bit, but Lauren, you don't, and it kind of doesn't matter. And I enjoy that mystery because you're able to fill in the blanks. So if another woman of color or a little girl of color is saying, oh, well, she's similar to me, she looks like me, what would it be like if I was in her shoes? Or I've experienced that before. You get a deeper sense of connection and understanding, I think, to the character because of the casting choice. And especially being surrounded by mostly white men. You can only imagine what it's like to be the only woman in this position. And then you see how Lauren is so uncompromising, and she's so tough, and she's so sometimes just like harsh, but she can't show her vulnerable. So she does in certain moments, but she can't lead with that, or else she will get crushed. And so I think that it's powerful to cast always the right person for the roles, but now I appreciate that, the industry is starting to step up to the world that we live in. I mean, this is the country that I know. I live in New York, and between New York and LA, and I'm surrounded by diversity. And so the fact that it's starting to become more, relevant and expressed more on our screens, it's incredibly impactful.
I want to single out your work as a humanitarian, basically, as a ambassador. What does that mean to you? How do you see the two sides? Do you see like actress? Do you let them kind of mingle?
I think the root is the same. It's all storytelling, and it's all using my platform, my voice, my body, my instruments to amplify causes, ideas, beliefs, stories that I can get behind, whether that's signing on to a show or advocating for a certain group or groups. And I think hopefully as an actor, what you're doing is you're bringing the three-dimensionality of the human experience out. You're getting people to understand and connect to characters that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have understood or connected to. You're getting them to see past their own judgments. And when you approach a script, when you approach a role, you have to deal with your own judgments, your initial impressions, and go beyond that, right? You have to try to understand, how does this person think? Not only how does this person think, how does this person feel? How does this person, interpret the world, perceive the world? What are these person's triggers? What is this person's, backstory? Why did they come to be? How did they come to be? Whenever you get more of this in-depth idea, these in-depth ideas and perceptions of human beings, they're all one. And so that's what humanitarian work is, right? It's that there are clear imbalances and injustices in the world. And I think if you are passionate about it, and I am, it feels like a sense of duty to use what I have in order to help, at least in the even in if it's a little way, create more balance and justice in the way people receive or understand other people's stories who they might not otherwise be curious about or invested in. So I do think they're similar work. And yeah, they come from a root of loving and caring deeply about the human experience.
I'll leave it on that note, but just to say that I feel like I didn't feel like the interviewer. I felt like you still had the position as interrogator. Now everything is kind of swirling around my head. See, it did work. I knew you would do it.
That's great.
But I did want to say how much I appreciated hearing from you and you sharing your thoughts on the show. It made a huge difference, and it's really, thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for asking such in-depth, beautiful, intelligent questions.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.